always helps. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And what can stop the determined heart? My name is Shahir Dowd.
And it's, parentheses, still alive! I'm Jamie Walsh.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film Frankenstein.
It's Frankenstein.
Frankenstein. Frankenstein.
Frankenstein?
It's Frankenstein. Frankie comes to town.
Frankie comes to town.
And it wasn't Hollywood.
Mr. Ketchup goes to Hollywood.
Podcast over.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Until next time, baby. No, are we done?
Yeah, we're pretty much done.
Nice.
I'm excited about this one. Jamie, it was a no-brainer to bring you back. I was here last week and you were like, I'm going to go see Frankenstein. I was like, it makes sense that you come to talk about it on the podcast. You were excited about this, right?
Yeah, I was looking forward to it because I am a big fan of Gothic literature, and when people take swings at Gothic movies, it's always really fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sometimes hit or miss on Guillermo, so I was wondering where I would hit on this one. And when we left the movie theater, I was like, Matt, I'm going to be on your podcast.
Jamie famously hates The Shape of Water.
I hate The Shape of Water.
Were you on that podcast?
No, I don't think I was.
Yeah.
But on one of the Christmas episodes, I believe you screamed about it in your drunken tirade with everyone else's drunken tirades. No, it wasn't just you. You know what I mean?
No, we have dry Christmas parties, but I get absolutely wrecked.
Yes, we have talked about Guillermo del Toro quite a bit on this show. We've done Nightmare Alley. I think we've done The Shape of Water. Have we done any other Guillermo del Toros? I don't know. We probably should revisit Blade 2 at some point.
I know.
Which would be dope.
If you want to revisit Guillermo movies, we can all go to the Paris Theater in New York. Right next to Bergdorf, where they are currently playing sort of an anthology. Was this the proper use of anthology?
Yeah, like an assortment of Guillermo del Toro.
They're going through the movies.
Yeah, they're going through Guillermo del Toro's The Paris Theater in New York City, which is owned by Netflix, which is, I think, the central distributor of the film. I'm not sure if they... No, they did produce the film in terms of like putting up the money for it as well.
I think this is part of his deal through the Pinocchio thing and a couple other things. You know.
Oh, we did Pinocchio on the podcast. Yeah, on the podcast, which was co-directed by him.
Right.
And so that's actually where I saw the film. Is that where you guys saw the film?
Yeah, I think that's the only place. Is that the only place in the city you can see it?
It's playing at the Alamo Drafthouse. It's playing at a few other smaller theaters as well.
That would have been fun.
But it was easier to get to for me to get to the Paris Theater. I was lucky enough to go with a friend of the show, Nick Lowe, who's been on before as well. And it's playing in 35 mil there. It is kind of odd to go to the Paris Theater. If you live in New York City, you should absolutely do it, because for being owned by a technology company whose entire ethos is about dragging the art of cinema into the 22nd century as much as is possible by, streaming whatever digital content as possible. The Paris Theater is such an old-timey theater. And they're playing a 35 mil print of this movie with all the splotches and cigarette burns, and the theater is very old, and it's not like a DTS surround digital theater or anything like that. It's very old timey. So there's just a little bit of, in my mind, a kind of a disconnect between it, but it makes perfect sense for Guillermo del Toro, and it makes perfect sense for this movie.
Yeah.
The Netflix of it was kind of like, oh, that's interesting.
The most updated physical element of that theater is they have attached plastic cup holders now to the back of the old seats. So the seat in front of you is your drink holder for you to have. That's the only new innovation. But these are the
old seats. Yeah. These are not updated, reclining, digital 4DX or anything like that.
To be clear, it's awesome. I was being all smirky walking in because, yes, it is owned now by Netflix, and Netflix is slowly just creeping into every aspect of our lives. Mm-hmm. And, we bought our box of popcorn. The popcorn's in a box, which I really like.
Delightful old
and
box.
It says Paris on it, and then there's the Netflix N is at the bottom. And I was like, oh, come on. Popcorn was delicious. Movie theater was wonderful. And I know it was a special screening, so everyone in there was a Guillermo del Toro head.
Yeah.
But it felt so good to be in a theater that was a little cramped, and everybody was just there, not to recline their seats, not to complain, not to go on their phones, but to watch a movie they were excited about.
Tell that to the French people next to me who were on their phones the entire time. But that's okay.
This is a theater where you could complain about that.
They got just a little
chatty.
They
didn't speak English.
They got a little chatty at the end.
I don't speak those words.
Excusez-moi, monsieur.
They got a little giddy at the end. I thought it was lucky that they were French because we don't speak French. And if they'd been like, is that Jacob Elordi? We would have noticed and we would have heard their words more clearly. Yeah.
I guess there's a potential for that theater to attract the tourist crowd who are staying at somewhere near
1,000%.
Central Park.
And I would say to do it. Like, I think that I don't want to, I'm not trying to besmirch this theater at all. I had a very good time. I love going to the Paris.
That was my first time going, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You hadn't been
Never
before
been
the Netflix
before.
thing?
No.
I've seen a few films there, but this is the first one I think since Netflix owned it.
Yeah, same.
The vibe, the thing that I thought was interesting is that like with Netflix, with any technology company, with anything like that, something like this would feel like strategically aligned with Netflix. This feels like it was a pet project of someone within Netflix who had a specific niche interest in this particular theater.
That is the best case scenario,
Yeah.
I think. I think also worst case, it is literally just an old timey theater that because they make money hand over fist, they don't really need to do much to other than keep it running, and it gets them in running for Oscar contention if they own and run a actual film through the system there for a certain amount of days, right?
Which is exactly why Frankenstein is playing there. Because you get to full wall it for I think a couple of weeks, and that makes you eligible.
So this is interesting.
Yeah.
Because like part of me is like yuck Netflix, and the other part of me is like thank you for doing like this little like the way that they have to like jump through hoops to make pet projects to do it, because they wouldn't do this otherwise. Their whole medium is getting you out of the theater to watch stuff at home. Like, but this, it's funny. They do this one little seed in the space they're trying to kill that allows them to kill more effectively. But I will say this.
It's hunting on their own ground.
Right. But this is my point. Like, two things can be true at once. I can dislike the attacking that Netflix is doing to cinema. But I can also even enjoy that Netflix does still have to do the cinema game. And when they do the cinema game, like an actual movie theater, they do it right. Does that make sense? Like,
sure. The attacking the cinema side, I would disagree with that when I think about things like Roma, like Alfonso Cuarón's Roma, which is a film that they entirely funded.
Let me rephrase. I think they're attacking They're attacking the business of going to a movie theater. You can't say they're not, and whether or not that's good or bad, you can't say that's not their goal. Like, they want you, and that's their business model. I have a Netflix subscription. That's totally fine. Their goal is to make you stay home and watch the thing you're paying for, or at the very least, forget that you're paying for it, right? Like, and there's nothing, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but they are in direct competition with it. But I would like to believe the best case scenario, that it is someone's pet project and they did see the Paris theater, and maybe that person really loved the Paris theater, and so they wanted to keep it in. Because
a Casa Bonita situation.
It's a Casa Bonita situation. You can also, I just watched that documentary. It's fascinating. But because you could also be Netflix and just buy any theater and just run it to get the technicality and go. You don't have to keep up a great institutional theater in New York City like this if you weren't interested in the quality of it. So there's, again, multiple things can be true.
So once we make $1 billion from the only podcast about movies, what institutions are we buying up? Are we buying up the Astoria World Manor? Are we buying up the Psychic next door?
I would rather
definitely the Psychic.
The coffee shop that we occasionally meet at.
I don't know.
What's our Casa Bonita?
What is our Casa Bonita? I would say
the laundromat.
My Casa Bonita is Fun Spot in New Hampshire, but that's neither here nor there.
Fun Spot?
It's gone. It's gone. It was gone 30 years ago.
Well, okay. Let's move into the movie because we have a lot of ground we want to cover. There's a lot to talk about with Frankenstein.
Speaking of fun spots, we got some emails coming.
We do have some emails, but I want to tell you guys what happened to me this week. I just thought this was a really fun story, a really fun thing that happened.
A fun spot, would you say?
Came into the apartment and said, "I have to tell a story," and we were like, "Okay."
And what's funny is like
wait for the podcast.
A couple of listeners I actually like message on a regular basis, and I was like, I told them immediately.
Okay,
and then I was like, I'm not going to tell Matt until we get to the podcast because I'm going to tell you on the story.
Okay.
I just thought this was fun. I am an avid cyclist. I love cycling. You guys have seen me riding around. I've stopped in front of you in my tight pants, which is like how you know, like you're.
He skids. He goes at you.
They're tight.
Yeah. He skids to the side and he just goes, "Sup, nerds."
Yeah.
But we don't know if like
he pulls his Oakleys off his face.
This is going to be important because that's an important detail to note in this story.
Okay.
Which is that, and I have not been cycling this much over the summer. But on Sunday, I happen to have like 2 to 3 hours to kill. And I love to go cycling. There's basically 3 spots that I love. One is Prospect Park, which takes about an hour to get there. And then you kind of do a couple hours there. Central Park or over to Randall's Islands, which is where I ended
Randall's Island, baby.
Randall's Island's fantastic. If anyone's hasn't looked it up, look up Randall's Island. They use it in a lot of television, a lot of filming locations. There's a particular spot underneath the RFK Bridge that has these like beautiful tall spires in it.
If you hit the water treatment plant, you've gone too far.
No, that's That's where I was. The water treatment plant was where I was when this happened.
That's where the bike path kind of ends, right? If I remember.
No, it goes through there. It goes alongside the water treatment plant, and it's beautiful, but it occasionally smells like a water treatment plant. Anyway, I was riding along, and I'd done a few loops. This was just like trying to get back into cycling, so I'll do like 3 or 4 loops around there. And I was on my last loop, and I was riding, and there's nobody on Randall's Island.
This is daytime, nighttime?
This is daytime, late afternoon, but there's nobody on Randall's Island except for a couple of sports games going on.
That's the best thing about Randall's Island is there's nothing there for anyone to do.
There's nobody there. So I'm riding along, and I passed like an elderly Asian couple. They've got their grandkids or something like that, and I'm kind of keeping riding. And then I hit my brakes hard about 50 meters past them. I hit my brakes so hard, and I stopped, and I was like, "There's just no way. There's just no way that this is the case." And I stop and I think about it, and there's a particular story that comes to my head, and I'm like, I got to do it. I got to do it. I turn my bike around, I ride back, I come up to the older couple, and I stop in front of the guy, and I was like, "Excuse me, are you Ang Lee?" and the guy was like, he looks at me first, because it's exactly the situation that you're describing, which is like this big nerdy guy on a bicycle like rocks up on his bike and pulls down his Oakleys.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Are you Ang Lee?" And he was like, "Yes, I am."
Yeah.
And he was
Randall's Island?
on Randall's Island by themselves. And here's the thing. He's there with his family. And I do the thing. I was like, "Look, I really am sorry. I don't want to bother you guys. Are you obviously having a nice day? I just wanted to tell you that your films have meant a lot to me. I'm about to make my first movie. And the story of how you made your first movie, Pushing Hands, has always inspired me. For those who don't know, Ang Lee didn't make his first movie until he was well into his 40s. And he raised his kids first, and then his wife is a scientist, and he raised his kids, and then
I can see Shahir.
Yeah,
there's a lot of connection.
Yeah, and I was just like, what are the chances? And this is the thing that his wife says to me. His wife is the most excited by this whole interaction. She is like, and she called like their granddaughter is with them. And she calls over the granddaughter, and she's like, look, granddad is really famous. You got to see this.
That's really cute.
and like Ang Lee, bless him, was like, yeah, nobody recognizes me ever. He was kind of chuffed with this whole thing. He was very entertained by this whole thing. He was like, oh, okay, you're a filmmaker. That makes sense. Because he was like, why would anyone recognize me on the street? Like, how many people would recognize anyone on the street? So we have like a lovely conversation. His wife is delightful. She asked me a lot of questions about the movie that I'm working on, and she was like, and then, Ang would jump in with like, "Oh, that sounds very similar to this movie that I made when I was a student." And then he also points out the fact that there's actually a institutional asylum on Randall's Island.
Yes.
He was like, "Oh, I made one of my first student films here." And then he points out his son, who's like in his 30s, and he's like, "My son was in it." And he was like, and so we get into this whole conversation. It was lovely. I thank them for their time. I wished I thought taking a photo would be too much or something like that, but
yeah, it's best that you didn't. Yeah.
But it was just a delightful interaction, like the sort of great New York thing. And again, it was just it was so much fun to see that his wife in particular was so excited by the fact that someone recognized it. She was like, "This is amazing. No one ever recognizes it."
I think the no photo is the way to go because the second you do photos, it weirdly, I think the experience for the person that you're going up to, it kind of just turns it into one more thing. Whereas
it's like I'm trying to get something.
Yeah. Whereas you just had a conversation and wanted to tell this dude how much his work meant to you, and then you got to meet his family.
Yeah.
Like, which is pretty damn cool.
And it was, it was funny because I was thinking about Pushing Hands, Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, Brokeback Mountain, which, is a really important film in my life. And the Hulk of all things. And then I went home and I told my wife about it. And she was like, and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
That's where my head would go first.
I got on his bike and rode back.
I thought about Lust, Caution before I thought about Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. But like, she was like, and the movie you and your son just watched a few weeks ago. And I was like, oh yeah, that one. So anyway, that was just cool.
Shahir, that is lovely. Yeah. That is a very good story.
Good. I'm glad.
And a good blessing for pre-movie Shahir.
Yeah.
As you move into this big project.
Well, and his wife and him said this thing, which was like, she just said it in a way. She was like, "You're definitely going to make it happen." And I was like, "Thank you very much."
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a huge, because now you can't not do it.
Now I can't do it because now I'll disappoint him.
Yeah.
That's true.
Don't do it. Yeah. You have to.
Because at some point in his life, later on, like 20, maybe 10 years from now, whatever, he's going to, if the movie does okay, he'll be like, there's that freaking weirdo.
That tall, nerdy cyclist that stopped my family on Randall Island
over there.
I like to think that when someone is well-known, achieved, celebrity, famous, many people talk to them, check in with them, but a lot of people are not treading the same water in some ways. Like you're a little bit more connected, I think, in what you would say. And I think, it's not just that he's
angry. So is Ben Stiller in The Cable Guy, my man.
Well, it's that you did approach him and he probably did come out of that kind of like, oh, that young guy is just like me. And, you weren't just a rando who happened to know that he was angry.
There was a moment when I asked him to begin with where I think he was looking at me going, is this guy serving me summons or something? Like it was like a weird...
Oh, because you're on your bike?
And I was like,
are you... find you?
And I was like, are you Ang Lee?
No, there's something special, and again, I can only relate to this story in a very weird way.
Okay,
and that is Ang Lee is an A-list filmmaker.
Yeah,
I am a Z-list internet celebrity.
Okay,
but at conventions or even on the street or something, if someone comes up to me and says, "Oh my God, I started watching Extra History, 6 years ago, and now I'm a history major and I do this thing, or now I'm in game design," and talks to me about the episodes that I've voiced that they do, which doesn't happen a ton, but when it does, because I'm not known even in my Z-list space, but there is something really special when people come up to you and say the thing that you are already proud of that they're caught on that maybe isn't their most well-known or sort of thing. It's just really nice. So I'm sure with what you've just described and how you described your relationship to his work, I'm sure that was incredibly flattering, because those are the kind of things as a Z-list internet celebrity that I can relate to, because you don't expect to be recognized. And then when you are recognized, it's not just like, oh, you're that guy who does that thing I heard of. It's here's the specific thing I love.
So what we're trying to tell everyone in the audience is if you see us walking down the street, come up
but
to
have a specific thing that you liked that we did or that you didn't like.
And we're going to do that to people we know as well from now on.
I do that. That's the only way. I won't go up to people that I famous people, or if I run into someone on the street or something like that. Case in point, I don't want to bore with the thing, but
I have a quick version of
go for
maybe
it, please.
Similar. In my first year of living in New York, I was crossing the street somewhere close to Times Square, and it was just me on the crosswalk going one way and a guy going the other way on the crosswalk, and our eyes met right in the middle, and it was Louis Black. And
oh, wow.
He did just this tiny flicker with his eyes that said, please don't. And I just didn't, I just didn't. And I got to the sidewalk and I thought, I'm a real New Yorker now. I leave celebrities alone. I'm a New Yorker.
Not me.
I blew up Neil deGrasse Tyson's spot once in the subway.
Yeah.
Where I waited for I was like, I'm not going to go up to him. No one's recognizing him. It's fine. And my stop came up, so the doors open and I passed him and I was like, hey, I just want to say I really appreciate all the work you're doing for science literacy and all this other stuff. And he's like, oh, thank you very much. And then I left and I turned. I was like, that wasn't a bad interaction. And then I turned and 9 other nerds were waiting to talk to him. The doors closed and it was like World War Z. We just watched that the other night. They just swarmed him and I was like, well, I fucked that up. But I will say, I ran into Jordan Kepler, who is one of the Daily Show hosts.
Daily Show. Yeah.
On an airplane back from Seattle, from PAX. And I waited for a long time and I was like, do I have anything to say to him? He's one of my favorite people on that show now. Yeah. I think he is a really great, young version energy of what that show can be. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, hey, I love the stuff in the Daily Show. I think yours is sort of the next generation of this. I forget exactly what I said. He goes, oh man, hey, thanks. And he stopped and I was like, that's it. He's like, oh no, okay.
He was like, tell me more.
Well, no, you don't want to take up people's time, but you want to give them something specific that you love about it. Anyway, we've been rambling about it. That's an amazing story.
Yeah,
it is a really great story.
We've definitely met people before in our interactions, but it's usually where they're there for their purpose. Paul Thomas Anderson was at a There Will Be Blood screening. Steven Soderbergh was at a Steven Soderbergh screening.
This was just working on things at MTV. We're we're working with this thing with you. That's literally how I fucking met Taylor Swift. It was the most baseline nonsense.
Were you with me when we did Taylor Swift?
I don't think we met Taylor Swift at the same time.
Oh, wow. We've had 2 Taylor Swift experiences.
Am I the only one here who's met Taylor Swift?
So easy to meet Taylor Swift.
This sucks.
Yeah. Anyway.
She's super cool. We got
email
emails.
us in. Email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com if you want to meet Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
That we can't help you, but if you'd like to meet her, you could let us know.
I also didn't take a selfie of that one either. Should have done it.
No, you shouldn't. I don't think selfies are necessary.
Anyway, you want to take the first email, Jamie?
Yeah. This email's from Michael. I know there are a ton of cool movies coming out now and only so much time, but are you guys planning on covering Begonia? I really enjoyed your Kinds of Kindness review. Thank you, Michael.
Begonia.
Begonia. My Begonia.
It is the new Yorgos Lanthimos movies. We've kind of covered a bunch of Yorgos Lanthimos movies. I would love to do Begonia. Screening times are a little tricky, but it is still playing right now. So, Michael, we have taken your email into consideration and we'll add it to the docket. If not in the immediate theatrical screening, we will find a time for it because we do love Yorgos Lanthimos and we love arguing about him.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. I don't know if it'll work out in the theatrical release, but that we go back all the time. Hell, 2 weeks ago we did All the President's Men. So listen, we go back quite a bit.
I just found out that Matt hasn't seen Miss Congeniality. So
I have not.
I'm going to try. I'm going to petition. What? What the fuck?
Jamie just peaked on Miscongeniality.
Sorry, everybody. Begonia is going to have to wait.
Friend of the show, Will Tempfer, was doing Comedy Survivor at UCB.
Yeah.
And his gimmick, his thing he did for the first round, and he was first picked, by the way, he's fucking killing it, is essentially a Miscongeniality joke where he came out in, I guess, a dress type thing that she wore doing like these glass.
Dirndl that Sandra Bullock wears.
Hilarious on its own act.
Yeah. But
I had no idea it was Miscongeniality, but the whole crowd, I was laughing, but the whole crowd did it. And then Jamie's like, it's like Miscongeniality. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. If it's not Demolition Man, I don't understand.
You don't know Sandra Bullock.
Yeah, not the early career. All right. The next email comes from Redacted.
Yeah, I redacted this.
You redacted this. Here we go. This is, hey, I have some insight what's today's Leisure Suit Larry? Probably. Never actually played Larry, but it's worth noting that there's a fairly large scene of adult indie games over on itch.io. That is very true. As Matt mentioned, Steam is overrun with no-effort porn cash grabs, but Itch is still largely home to actual humans putting in actual effort. I've taken a peek at Itch's selection more than once. A lot of games are juvenile, derogatory. Some games are icky. Some authors are clearly rather young, which feels weird. Some games have a respectable level of craftsmanship. Some of the narrative-driven ones can be very engaging. More than once, I've begun a game because, frankly, the porn looked good, and dozens of hours later, I realized I'd been tricked into reading a rather long book. Mildly embarrassed to admit I look at these things at all. Then again, I've recently seen firsthand what Outlander is all about, and I know several women who evidently aren't embarrassed to be fans. I'm told it's called a bodice ripper. I've amused myself by describing the adult games I play as bodice rippers for him. Thank you, Redacted. Hey, listen. So yeah, we talked about a lot of this on our weekly talk show on Extra Credits called Games for Breakfast. So recently, I'll sort of pivot this back into Redacted's email, but recently, there has been a campaign from a conservative Australian group that has been that got enough of a hubbub going where process payment companies, Visa, MasterCard, etc., sort of soft leveraged places like Steam and Itch and all this stuff to take down a lot of their adult themed games. Now, what this conservative group does, and they've done this for video games and films throughout, I think for like 15 years, they have won some, they've lost some. But this is the first time they started directly sort of pressuring and having a campaign of people messaging and calling and writing into like payment processors. Steam and Itch in a couple places. Steam is very big. Itch is much smaller. Started having to pull down a lot of their not safe for work content. Now, some of it, in my opinion, is incredibly smutty and awful and like snuff film levels of crap. Right. But that's not the majority of it. Okay. And like now should Steam and places police themselves more in this? Yes, they absolutely should. But the interesting thing, and I will promise I'm getting back to Redacted's email here, is this was the first time in a while that payment processors were starting to arbiter basically what you could and could not buy. Right. And I think this, as we're moving sort of further and further into this sort of conservative form of government, etc., this is going to come for everything that is any sort of perverse thing. And so what I really like about Redacted's email here is Itch, like, Itch in general is a place that is far more, in my opinion, less like low effort stuff, including if we're getting into like the porn area of it. But like in a sea of like AI nonsense, Itch is sort of it feels very bespoke. Okay. And I'm actually, while it's not my cup of tea, I'm happy that Redacted like found these digital bodice rippers for him over there, made by real people. Yeah. Like if you're going to engage with any sort of art, whether it be the highest class novel or the highest class pornography, I think that it is important that it is made by an actual human being. And that there's some effort put behind it. So I'm happy to have that clarification about the Laser Shoot Larry conversation we had last week.
Yeah. I reached back to Redacted. Redacted did not ask to have their name redacted. I just did it out of courtesy because they mentioned that on the email. But I also mentioned that, no kink shaming here. No shaming. Man. Do whatever works for you. I am not aware of Itch. I'm like literally looking at it for the first time right now.
I'm only quiet because I have no idea what we're talking about.
Right.
Well, so even some of the biggest games of the year, Cyberpunk, Baldur's Gate 3, like they have sex scenes in them. And again, I wouldn't call it, that's not the point of those games, but there are elements of sexuality and sexual scenes in video games now.
Do you do whatever works for you? I'm not, no shame in the game here. I just remember.
Shame in the game.
No shame in the game.
Get it? That works on multiple levels.
There you go. I think about it when I think I got asked to review Alan Moore's book, Lost Girls, at some point. And if you don't know, he wrote Lost Girls, I think was with his wife, might be his ex-wife at this point. I'm not actually entirely sure. But the whole point was he wanted to rewrite, I think it was the Alice in Wonderland story, the Wizard of Oz story, and a couple of others. But he was like, and we're going to, he's going to apply the same artifice in terms of writing, like that he did with Swamp Thing. But he was like, but I also wanted to make it make everyone very aware. We're writing porn and we want to write porn and we want to make it absolutely pornographic, and I was like, oh, this is an interesting, this is what he does. And this is what, he's really intentional about it. Not sneaking it in, not being coy about it. It's and it was really
Sorry,
good.
I'm just going to avoid making a joke.
So let's move on to our final email, which is actually directly about Frankenstein. I apologize with a big, long preamble. This is partly my fault with my story and with all sorts of other things that we've got going on here. I will put a time code marker here. But Prashant had emailed us specifically about Frankenstein. And it's a little bit of a longer email, but I swear it ties into the movie.
Long preambles are a big part of Gothic literature, so we're right on the money.
There you go. Hey again, Shahir and Matt. Hope you're well. For the benefits of your readers, Shahir and I briefly exchanged emails about Guillermo del Toro's new adaptation of Frankenstein. So my comments in this email follow that prior conversation. I think, like most people, I consider Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley's Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus to be the foundation of modern sci-fi storytelling. It is also a feminist story that, since it deals with themes of birth and abandonment, even though through the primary protagonists are men. I recently read the annotated version of the novel, which was published by the MIT Press and is available open access. I'll include a link for that as well. I think the annotated version does a phenomenal job of drawing attention to just how brilliant Shelley was in constructing the novel and how adept she was at understanding the philosophical and scientific debates of her age. I also want to mention Brian Merchant's book, Blood in the Machine, which is a historical account of the Luddite rebellion against automation and weaving factories in the early 19th century and a brutal state repression that followed. A political event that clearly shaped how Mary thought about the cruelty of capitalism and technology. In fact, this is one of the reasons why I was drawn to Frankenstein over the last few years. As I've mentioned in some previous emails, I did my doctoral research on the repair and maintenance of railway lines. I want to mention one particular scholar who really inspired me, Julian E. Orr. In the 1990s, he wrote a book on photocopy machine technicians, which suggested that technicians actually repair the relationship between users and machine as much as they repair the machines themselves. Orr calls this the socialization of technology. He actually wrote a couple of essays in the 2000s which reference Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. He says the creature truly becomes a monster when he was abandoned by his creator, Victor. Quite like the creature, technology becomes the monstrous when it is not built with care, when it is adequately cared for, when it is not adequately cared for by repair workers, whose work is usually considered invisible and less valuable. This is something socialist feminists have long argued about care work in general. In my doctoral thesis, I spent a chapter writing about the retrofitted trains, which were older trains that were reassembled with new motors in the mid-2000s. These trains were Frankensteinian in their own way, assembled with parts of older trains, a new beating heart and powered with 25,000 volts of electricity. And unlike the creature, these trains were cared for by railway engineers who painstakingly repaired them whenever they broke down, until they ran relatively smoothly before being replaced by newer trains. Now, Prashant then follows us on with a discussion of Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which I'm going to actually hold so that we can talk about it later in another email or another day, just because that's what we want to talk about here. But I will say this, Prashant was disappointed by Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. And so with that, again, Prashant, thank you for that email. And I think that is a perfect setup to the kind of conversation we want to have here in terms of what Frankenstein's role is and Mary Shelley's observations about the world in terms of capital, technology, and socialization. Matt, could you tell us what this iteration, I think there are something like 40 iterations of Frankenstein in cinema. Can you tell us what this particular one by one Guillermo del Toro is about?
It's almost like it's popular. Frankenstein, as the Internet Movie Database says, the 2025 version that is, a brilliant but egotistical scientist brings a creature to life in a monstrous experiment that ultimately leads to the undoing of both the creator and his tragic creation.
I missed the laugh. Sorry, guys, I was writing.
That's okay. No, Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, is the cornerstone of science fiction. Mm-hmm. That's just what it is. I sadly, to my detriment, did not quite realize this until later in the game when my progenitor, Dan Floyd and James Portnow, did their extra sci-fi on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Mm-hmm. And that really sort of caused me to go down the deep dive of like figuring out where all the stuff I love comes from in this sort of genre. It's fascinating, and it's amazing how you can relate it to not only narrative work and films and literature and music, etc., and games, but you can how do I put this? You also keep seeing this story because it is so resonant with a variety of times being remade and retold and redone over and over and over again. Some with more tweaks than others, but there is a real there's just something really primal to the concepts that this story asks you to think about. And I'm always sort of up for the next iteration of it. Obviously, Guillermo del Toro is an amazing director whom I love, I think, nearly every one of his films that I've seen. And I was very excited to go see this in an actual movie theater, even though I knew that this was a Netflix production and that's not where the majority of people will be able to see it.
Yeah. Jamie, do you want to talk about your relationship with Frankenstein or with Jacob Elordi or whatever you want to go? Jacob
Elordi is my son. Yeah. Everybody has to be nice to him. No, it's funny. He's like, I was reading a little bit about casting for this, and I think
he was not the first choice.
Oh, I didn't read that. What I did read was that they liked him because he's such a little sweetie. They met him and they were like, he's so kind and he has these big sensitive eyes, and they were like, we want that in the monster. We want, the previous iteration of this movie. I think the most recently made before this was 97, 95, 94's Frankenstein with Kenneth Branagh and Robert De Niro. Yeah. The vibes are different.
Yeah.
That movie's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's very close to the plot of the book. So if you want something very, very chapter for chapter, not quite chapter for chapter, but close, that's your movie. Anyway,
book, right?
I have read the book. Yes, yeah. I love the book, and I was going to go pick it up and read it again because this movie was so interesting to see this movie that is very different from its source material, very different. And when it started, I was like, oh, we're taking big swings here, and it took me a second to settle into that, and now I have a guess at what the rest of that email says, and I can understand it, but if my guess is correct, but I think it proved to me that Guillermo del Toro is a masterful artist. Mm-hmm. That this was a fabulous translation and adaptation of one form of media, being a novel, to a film. Mm-hmm. It is an impressionist painting of the original script or text, but in that he's brought out the flavors and tones that made more sense to him. And to me, it's extraordinary work.
I think that's the point of a good remake, right? Is you want to maintain as much of what made the thing special while also putting your stamp on it to make it worth making again.
Yeah.
And that's not easy.
Yeah, it's like a really good cover of a song doesn't sound necessarily like the original song.
Yeah.
If you make the same song but you sing it, you've made a bad cover.
Is this the Limp Bizkit's faith of cinema for you?
I love Limp Bizkit's face.
Was it a George Michael cover?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard that.
Really?
But I will listen to that.
Yeah.
You will age 5 years upon listening to it. It really is a doozy.
So I, in reverse chronological order, did a lot of homework for this week. Probably spurred on a little bit by Prashant and I email exchanges. But I saw Guillermo del Toro's first. I was concurrently reading the book at the same time. I had seen Kenneth Branagh's version many years ago, but I rewatched it for this episode because I actually quite like Kenneth Branagh's version. It is very maligned. A lot of people don't like that version. If you recall back, or if you're old enough to remember, in the early 1990s, there was a sort of the first attempt at reviving the Dark Universe, spurred on by Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, which did immensely well, and followed by Mary Shelley's Kenneth Branagh's adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. The sort of famous thing was to attach the writer's name to these things. So it was Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. There was an adaptation of Wolf with Jack Nicholson. And there was one
Dark
more.
Universe can't catch a break.
Oh, Mary Riley, which was the other adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from the point of view of Dr. Jekyll's maid, played by Julia Roberts in that film. And so I that was like my introduction. I think, Guillermo del Toro talked about the fact that he watched the James Whale adaptation. I had not seen the James Whale adaptation. I'd seen the Rob Kwandon movie of Gods and Monsters, which is about James Whale in his last days with Brendan Fraser, where Brendan Fraser kind of like stands in for a Frankenstein style character at some point. It's quite beautiful. But for this episode, I also went back and rewatched the original James Whale 1931 Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein, which I gotta say, if you haven't seen it, is awesome. Bride of Frankenstein is like, I think
you're talking the classic, right?
Yeah.
It's the best one of the. It's one of the best ones of the classic monsters.
Yeah, and it's often cited as one of the greatest sequels of all time, and I can kind of see why when I watched it. It's fantastic. There is the alignment with Guillermo del Toro and Frankenstein like makes 100% sense. Guillermo del Toro at one point was in New Zealand working on an adaptation of The Hobbit. It was sort of post the period that Peter Jackson had been working on King Kong. And that is the sort of similar alignment that I see, which is King Kong was a hugely influential film for Peter Jackson, and he eventually remade that in the early 2000s as well. Sort of, in a way, it's the these kinds of projects like King Kong for Peter Jackson are the white whale of filmmakers like Guillermo del Toro. It's like the thing that has kind of like spurred them to become a filmmaker.
Yeah,
and then, in the beautiful way that Guillermo del Toro kind of talks about his projects, he talks about being fearful of making Frankenstein because it is so important a text in his work. And the thing that I think really makes the text beautiful is like the love that he has for the monster. It makes perfect sense for the guy who made Shape of Water or his Hellboys.
Yeah, Matt pointed this out. He was like, there's always like a lady in love with a yoked monster.
It's always going to be. And Jacob Elordi's performance is the reason to see the movie. It is beautifully lithe. It's like oddly, there's sort of a Jane Austen quality to it at some point.
He's very graceful as the monster.
There's occasional moments where he feels like a Disney princess at times.
Yeah.
Like he wanders around and he's like this beautiful creature, like wandering the woods, and animals love him. And he's like, beautifully lithe and that sort of thing. But he's also, and this would be a kind of a minor spoiler, one of the transformative things that this adaptation does is he's also immortal and has superhuman strength,
which that's so Guillermo.
Yeah,
that's so Guillermo.
Yeah.
That's the name of our new podcast.
Yeah. He can survive underwater for long periods of time as well.
Well, he was drowning. He was repeatedly drowning. Is what happened every time he went underwater. But he can't die in this version. Spoiler alert! In this version, Guillermo can't die. Frankenstein's monster cannot die. That is a
he's a Highlander in this version.
It's a diversion from the original text for sure. But it's also, in my opinion, totally acceptable because this is a Gothic story and supernatural occurrences are a huge part of Gothic story.
Yeah. We should get into spoiler versions because I think we have to talk a lot about like the diversions that this particular adaptation makes. But before we do that, just to say it, I thought Guillermo's version was gorgeous. It was beautiful. It's sumptuous to look at. In terms of production design and in actual design itself, Guillermo del Toro is second to none in terms of like bringing the elements to the screen that really need to be bring. There's a moment in this where Victor's mother is standing on the steps of their house with like a red dress waving in the wind, and it's just like sumptuous and gorgeous and beautiful. And when she passes away, as she does in all versions of the story, her casket is this sort of like beautiful, almost seems at home in a Dune adaptation in terms of like the beautiful.
It reminded me of The Fall.
Yeah. That's a perfect appreciation there. And I think, one thing I've noticed about Del Toro that I will say that I kind of, it became apparent to me in Nightmare Alley is he's become a fan of the wide angle Steadicam. Like as his main sort of transportation module or his main sort of like visualization module. So while the sets will be beautifully ornately designed, someone like, a really sort of obvious example is Wes Anderson will kind of also design camera moves that are fixed according to the sets and stages.
Right.
Del Toro has a sort of opposite approach, which is that it seems like the entire stage is built to the extent where he can kind of move 360 through it. And then the sort of preferable choice is the wide angle Steadicam, which will then just walk through the entire space. And you kind of get the grandeur of what you're seeing that way. I'm somewhat less a fan of that approach because I like the idea that the camera is in dance with the production design. But it's still beautiful. It's still gorgeous to look at. In terms of the changes that this particular film makes, and Matt, I'll be interested to hear what your thoughts are here. I found that in the sum total of all the changes that were made here, most of them didn't add up to anything more meaningful in the text for me. So, for example, Christoph Waltz's character is a major addition to the story that ultimately doesn't mean a lot in terms of the story. It kind of gives some like details on how Victor gets, the finances in order to do this. And there's a sort of idea about like the longing for eternal life that's in there, but it didn't really add up to much. There's changes to Elizabeth's origin. Typically she's been played as Victor's adopted sister, whom he eventually falls in love with.
Totally normal thing to do.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? But in this version, he is actually, she is betrothed to his brother, who is played to be closer to his age than he normally is in other adaptations. And there was one particular moment that I thought, oh, this is interesting. This is the idea that's going on here. And there's a sort of a scene where Elizabeth and Victor are sitting at a table and she gets to espouse her ideas about why creation matters. And she sort of refers to this idea that there is this destruction of man going on all around them, and the wars that are being waged all around them. I thought that was like hinting at an interesting idea. And I wanted to see it come back, but ultimately she sort of falls into the same role that she does in other adaptations. And it didn't, for me, add up to more than that. And so oddly, I will say, of having read the book, watched 4 movies, I would have watched actually a couple more if I could have, had more time this week. The Kenneth Branagh one is really fascinating. Frank Darabont wrote the second draft of that screenplay, and he says it was the best screenplay he ever wrote, made into one of the worst films he's ever seen. He was like Darabont, I think, and Steph Laddie, who I think wrote the original draft of that screenplay as well, said it was just one of the wildest adaptations they'd ever seen. Like in terms of being so melodramatic, and I actually agree with that. Like there is some wild swings in that movie. Like if you want to see really, amazing shirtless shots of Kenneth Branagh, you're going to see that in the movie that he directed, starring him. But the actual...
I forgot there are a lot of shirtless Kenneth Branagh in that movie.
When it happens as well in Kenneth Branagh's adaptation, you're just like, whoa, this is a lot.
Like Victor Frankenstein is supposed to be an egomaniac, but it like passes, it goes into like this weird meta world where you're like, this isn't no longer, Victor doesn't have control anymore.
Yeah. But oddly, the changes that are made there, which, that film actually does follow Darabont's script. That's the other thing. Actually, I read Darabont's script this week as well. It follows Darabont's script pretty closely. It's just in tone, much more melodramatic than Darabont's script is. And but what Darabont wrote are actually fascinating changes to the text. They're subtle, but they do add up to more than what I think the text involves. And the big one, and this is a spoiler for the 94 version, is that like in all versions, the monster kills Elizabeth. But in this case, Victor reanimates Elizabeth to try and make him into a bride, and then he doesn't want to give it up to the monster. And actually that change, and it has one of the most haunting things, which is that Elizabeth is reanimated, comes back to life, and realizes that now she is like this and destroys herself.
Which is, if you're going to take that swing in a movie, the appropriate way to end it.
And like for me, that is actually more, compared to everything that we saw in Guillermo del Toro's version, which is beautiful and far much more tonally in control than Branagh's version. But a much more interesting kind of like take on the material. So, before we get into spoilers, I'll just say I really immersing myself in the material. Branagh's version kind of came up top for me, and Del Toro's version, while beautiful, I kind of found was like just more of a sort of like interesting,
It made a lot of characters, I would say, more like sort of pillars of principle in.
Like the Charles Dance character.
Yes, right, Charles Dance. I think William, rather than just being like some 11-year-old that gets murdered. Spoiler for the original text. He's
afraid of Victor.
He's a bit of a counter to Victor. Yeah. Elizabeth isn't the orphaned girl that the family takes in that they eventually get married. She is her own person. They almost kind of take Victor's personality and split him into Victor, played by Oscar Isaac, and Elizabeth, in that he's very science focused, very medical focused, very much just driven to, he's singular in his quest to defeat death. And the interests in nature and the natural world and the divinity of God and design all goes into Elizabeth. And so he has a counter in her who is not his adopted sister. I can't stress enough how important that is that she's not there in the movie.
Yeah.
And I thought it helped, there's no like rigmarole of like, oh, this kid died. Oh, maybe the housemaid did it. By the way, the housemaid's name is Justine. By the way, here's Justine's background.
Justine doesn't in this film, right? Is she?
She's not in this film.
She's not.
And you know what? Didn't miss her.
Yeah.
It translated a more simplistic and probably more digestible cast of characters. I thought a lot about Willy Wonka at the end of our evening when we saw this, because everybody largely loves the Gene Wilder version, which is very different from Roald Dahl's book. And I'm pretty sure Roald Dahl hated that movie because it was so different. And then they made a version that was pretty close with Johnny Depp, and it's an atrocity. So,
and then Chalamet came back, and we don't even know. We talked about the Chalamet movie?
Absolutely skipped it. Yeah. Sorry, could be wonderful.
Made a
don't want
shit ton
it.
of money.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't have to be word for word what the story was. A younger me would not have, I think, the maturity to see that. But this movie brought out tones of the story that made it feel to me richer and different. And there are so many ways to see Frankenstein, the piece, that this was just another telling, and it was brilliantly done.
Yeah, I loved this movie quite a bit, though I will say I dislike the ending, but I think the quality and the differences that are done in this version outweigh that dislike. And I think for listeners of this show, if I say I don't like an ending, that normally does spoil a movie for me. It did not spoil this movie for me. I want to very stress like how much I think the other strengths of this movie outweigh that element that I do not like. Shahir, going back to some stuff that you were saying, which is very interesting. I think you are absolutely correct in the like, why is this character here? Why is this character here? And Jamie, your idea of them being like archetypes, that makes total sense. What I think is happening is as these characters come and go in this movie, either through being alive and then dead or just in it and then out of it, etc. I think this is Guillermo basically paying homage to elements that happen, or like either themes, if you're talking about specifically like Harlander, who's now an addition, but there's still the theme of like life immortal, etc., like, or someone doing it for their own gain or whatnot, as opposed to just like Victor Frankenstein who's just doing it because he's an egomaniac. Then you have, of course, Mia Goth's Elizabeth, you know, and the differences sort of there. And like, I even thought there was a certain point when the moment that the monster comes back into Victor, he's like, you need to make me a companion to live with because I can't die. Like, I was like, oh, are they going to go the Bride of Frankenstein in this movie too? Like, I felt like Guillermo kept setting up either narrative or character expectations that we expect in Frankenstein as both an homage and a little bit of a red herring to sort of veer you away, but always, and then like those don't actually go anywhere because truly, what you can tell from the text that we're talking about, that's not the point. It's all about dad stuff. This is the thing that he is interested in. And he is, I mean, from the intro that we saw of him talking about the film that I had to really listen hard to because the French people next to me wouldn't shut the fuck up.
I'm very sorry about that. I heard no French.
Well, I heard a lot of it. I was trying to focus on what the director was saying and it was difficult. But essentially, Cheer, like you said, this is the movie that he's always been afraid to make, but always wanted to make. And you can see elements of Frankenstein in every fucking thing he's done. And now that he gets to do it, I'm like, because he like the novel Frankenstein is literally one of the greatest novels ever written. I think you need, as a creative that wants to adapt that thing in order to have it be taken seriously, you need to sort of earn the chops to do it. I think Guillermo has done that above and beyond. And now if he wants to tell the version that's all about dad stuff that ties into both the way he became a creative and his relationship with his father, and then he just hints at all the other stuff and has to drop them because he really wants to focus on that, he's the guy to do it because he does that incredibly well. I loved Oscar Isaac, who we haven't even really talked about at all in this movie. I think he chews scenery in the best kind of way that you don't,
was fabulous.
Like that you don't
Best
like,
hats.
but in the gothic, in the gothic style of chewing scenery, where it's the point and it's not a distraction.
Where he throws himself soaking wet, shirtless with suspenders and two red leather gloves onto a bed, and you're like, sure,
why not?
You've earned this.
And I think the relationship between Leopold Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein, and the creature are the cycles of both abuse and how that abuse changes and what that means and what it can do to people and what the world, like how the world informs abuse and the ways that sons relate to their fathers and vice versa. And like it all felt so amazing and connected in a piece that is literally about a stitched together dead man that regenerates. Yeah. And I absolutely loved it. And the ending, I won't sort of go, are we kind of past spoilers? I guess
spoilers?
We are, because it's almost like an hour.
Guys, spoilers.
Spoilers now. But no, I love the narrative structure of starting on the ice. And I love the how the stories are then told, and like when it goes from like chapter 1 to like the Victor's story to like the creature's story, I was like, yes. The thing that because I have not read the book in a very long time, like I did not remember how they got there, and so I was like, wait, how did they get there? And then like I don't know if you could both inform me on this because I absolutely forget. Like it's just like Victor chases him there, but then like he's chasing the monster's chasing Victor, but like basically by the time we get there in this version of the movie, it made no sense as to why or how they got there. And then there's scenes,
sled dogs,
sure, and then there's sort of scenes on the boat where it's just like ultimately, and this is sort of I think where the author is most seen because of the story and the experience that Guillermo wants to give the audience. There is a forgiveness from the monster to Victor before Victor passes. And look, I think that is a lovely, dare I say, life-affirming change. But as far as like making it feel like a cohesive whole with what I enjoyed about the film, I felt like that was just sort of like, listen, his right, he made something phenomenal, and he made it so phenomenal that an ending I did not like, I do not care. But like, I was just thinking, like, for me, that rang too quick, and in that case, too hollow. And I didn't particularly like that.
If I recall, you felt like the ending was a little emotionally rushed.
Yeah, incredibly emotionally rushed. It takes its time in a lot of elements, and then it rushes, it like speed runs to the end.
Yeah, because they wrap up real quick in a way that gives us an optimistic ending.
But also, like, what I really like about Gothic storytelling in general is it does kind of shirk traditional narrative, factions or elements in certain ways. And this felt like it was riding that line the entire way till the end. And they're like, oh shit, you understand the 3-quadrant movie, right? Okay, cool. We're just going to go here now. And now everyone forgives. Goodbye. I'm walking into the sunset. And I was like,
well,
I think it was the sunrise.
The big distinction here is that in both the Whale adaptation and Kenneth Branagh's version and in the book, the monster cremates itself with its creator. That has been true across all the versions. In Boris Karloff's,
in the book, doesn't he just take off?
No, he burns.
No, he says he's gonna. He's gonna kill himself.
But we don't see him.
He just bails.
He just bails at the end.
That's pedantic. Sorry.
Yeah. But for example, in the Karloff version, like there's a wonderful scene where like he shoos away Victor when he decides to burn down the entire house. It's slightly different. It doesn't go to Antarctica, but he's like, "We deserve to die." And kills himself in that version as well. So there's a kind of like beautiful optimism to this where Jacob Elordi's character, the monster, essentially will live eternal because he is a Highlander. And there was, by the way, in terms of multiple versions of this, don't forget that there was both a version of the film called Victor Frankenstein with Daniel Radcliffe that came out a few years ago, and another version which was kind of like the superhero version of it, with Aaron Eckhart called I, Frankenstein, where Aaron Eckhart plays like Frankenstein who's lived throughout the years and now is
or the monster.
He's the monster.
Makes a lot of sense that Eckhart did that.
Heck, there's even in Creature Commandos, James Gunn's DC animated thing, there's the Bride and Frankenstein are two main characters.
And if we did the monster, what was it? The Monster Squad? Wasn't there a Frankenstein in the Monster Squad? Look, there's so many versions of this.
I think the Monster Squad.
He's in the monster.
He's one of the monsters, right?
And he interacts with Scooby-Doo and...
Can you imagine, was Javier Bardem going to play him in the...
He was going to play the monster.
In the Dark Universe.
In the updated Universal Dark Universe.
I just learned today that the National Theater has a filmed play where...
Danny Boyle directed that.
Danny Boyle directed, and Benedict Cumberbatch plays either Victor or the monster. They switch roles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty interested in seeing that, frankly.
Yeah, look,
frankly,
there's almost, if you look at it that way, there's almost like it starts to compare itself to Jekyll and Hyde a little bit. Another like nice, quick Gothic read.
There's in Bride of Frankenstein, there's an actress who plays Mary Shelley at the beginning of the film, where they kind of recreate the famous scene where Byron Shelley, both the Shelleys were there, and they try to tell each other the scary story. And then when they go into the story, I believe that actress plays either Elizabeth or the bride. I'm not entirely sure. It's two different roles there, but there's that kind of mirroring that goes on.
Yeah, the mirroring is crucial to the story. Very important, because I think there's a lot of yes, dad stuff, Matt. You are correct. But also,
it's dad stuff all the way down.
If you're not a dad, you can still relate. Don't worry, because there's the sense of like intellectualism, human sophistication versus like the childness of innocence it's a concurrent in all of these plots. It's a huge part of Frankenstein.
Interestingly, in the book, in the Shelley book, and in the Kenneth Branagh version, where he's played by Ian Holm, the dad is a loving father. Is a very, very kind, loving father.
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy, and so like I actually found the child's dance thing. I guess maybe it's the Game of Thrones side of it as well, but it felt like oh, he's the abusive dad. Let's bring him in, and he's going to do that role here.
This is the Guillermo story. I'm not saying that we know whether or not his father or anything about that, but like this is the way he's talked about this movie and making it. This is a conversation he's having with the concept of his father.
But the thing that I thought was interesting was this idea that Elizabeth had a different approach to what she thought creation was, and she's in the film. She is fascinated by entomology. She's fascinated by bugs.
Loves bugs.
And loves the idea of bugs. And I want to preface all of this with saying I quite enjoyed watching the movie. I just found that on all of the material that I absorbed this week, and so in many ways, what I'm talking about is like a sort of comparative approach to this, and just looking at all the different versions of this and which one do I actually prefer. And I do prefer the Branagh version. That is a hot take, by the way. People hate that.
Extremely hot take, Sheer.
People hate that movie.
And not just talking about him without his shirt on.
Oh, it's so hot. The thing about Elizabeth that I actually really liked was this idea that she notices the destruction of human beings all around her and suggests that the act of creation doesn't just involve, and this might be imagined on my part or just kind of thinking about like how she's different to other iterations of the story. But the act of creation doesn't just involve the sort of lightning rod of creation, but it then involves nurturing and caring for, and ultimately that is kind of a feminist text, which is that it is about the nature of the mother in the role of growing the child. And this is the role that Victor completely fails at. You know, like this is something that is not in any of the adaptations. This is entirely Guillermo's creation here, but he takes the creature who only utters the word Victor, chains him up downstairs, basically feeds him and does not nurture him in any way. There's sort of scenes of Jacob Elordi as the creature kind of like playing in water by himself, which really, I just rewatched Grave of the Fireflies recently, and it reminded me a lot of Sasuke, I think, you know, like playing in water by himself and looking at her reflection. Maybe it's Narcissus looking at his reflection. But there's this sort of like, and so I thought like, oh, this is what Elizabeth's kind of arc in the film is, which is like to do with this idea that Victor is not a capable father, you know, as handed down to him, because he's unable to nurture this child. He's unable to nurture the monster. And what the monster really needs is a mother or a maternal figure or someone to nurture him.
Well, yeah, I think it's funny. It's interesting. I think because of David Bradley's character, the blind man, it's not necessarily saying it's a mother or a father. It's just like you need a nurturing force to help you grow as a thing. And something even Oscar Isaac's Victor sort of says right after he succeeds, he's kind of like, I didn't really think about like what happens after. Like I did it.
And surprisingly in the book and the Branagh version and even the James Whale adaptation, the common thread is Victor doesn't just abandon the monster, like he actively throws the monster out. Like often the monster, there's no story where the monster like lives with Victor for a long period of time. And go, this is entirely new. Like in the Branagh version, he's literally kicked out the night, you know, like presumed dead.
Yeah.
And then is surprised to find him alive. So I found all of that stuff interesting, but then when Elizabeth's role ultimately kind of like suggests that she loves the creature, you know, despite having those like only two interactions where it hands her, you know, where the creature hands her a leaf. I found like the
stakes are low out there right now for the dating scene.
Yeah, I guess. Well, she was going to marry William, who seems like a nice guy.
Seems like a nice guy. I'll push back ever so slightly on this because I talked about this when Jamie and I went and got dinner after the fact. Because like there's something in Gothic literature or Gothic cinema that it can do this thing, and different styles of storytelling have their own specific things they can do this with. The sort of have your cake and eat it too sort of thing. The romance area of this movie with Elizabeth and the monster is not well set up, and it's funny. I don't even.
It's the Shape of Water.
No,
it is. It's literally a creature who falls in love with this like external force.
I would argue. Sorry, derailing a bit. I have to circle back.
Yeah.
The Shape of Water is a movie entirely about that, and therefore it is earned in things like this, and even Hellboy and a couple other things that Guillermo has done. Going back to this movie specifically as a work of Gothic cinema, you can and you are allotted and able to still pull off these sort of like, again, it's not in the text of the script that she's in love with this creature, but the way that she is directed and her character acts toward the creature with these sort of more middle of the road words leads us to believe that there is something there, or you could take that if you want. So again, in this particular version, I think one of the get out of jail free cards you get is the way that this is handled. Do I think if you take it the way that there's like a romance, does it work? No. Does it? But also, in my opinion, does it matter because that's just the fucking trope that these things do? Then no.
Listen, you guys know I'd happily disparage men writing women all day, but I'm gonna go out and defend her arc because I, at the very least, didn't mind it. She has that monologue at the beginning about war and how war is so wasteful, and the people that are devising war are so frequently sitting and watching it from the comfort of their warm blankets.
Yeah.
And then, she has this kind of like back and forth with Victor. You wonder if maybe they're gonna hook up or depart from what they're supposed to be doing. And she ultimately turns away. She goes to see him and finds him wanting in some ways, and then and leaves him. And then when she discovers
does have a romance with Victor, not with the monster.
Yes,
Yeah.
I don't know how far.
Does she?
They go to dinner together.
Dance.
They dance.
Yeah,
There's
a courtship.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
High five for using the same word.
And it's also him much more infatuated with her.
Yes.
She's interested in him.
She finds she doesn't quite get there with him. And then when she discovers that he's not only created a human life, but also is neglectful and abusive.
Yeah.
And she's wondering if, maybe this was like divine. Maybe he's meant to be created and nurtured and turned into this like new being of good. I forget what she says to him, but basically when she finds out that he's just not really going to change course, she's like, so you're the same people that are waging the wars. She's so let down by him. And I think, to me, that is a read that she is let down by people in general. She doesn't fit in. She doesn't really like how anything works. She's really attached to the natural world. And when she on her wedding day meets the monster again, I didn't read it as they're in love. I know that it's they're holding each other's faces. It's big.
I mean, that's kind of my point of having your cake and eating it too. The story and her story leading up to that it's not supporting that at all. It's the performance there that you can kind of like dabble into it because that's a trope of these things.
Also Jacob Elordi and Mia Goth,
what are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
But and this is a very romantic story. So that comes in. But romanticism doesn't just mean, love and sex and flowers. It means intensity of emotion and individualism and big feelings. And when she spoiler gets shot and
by Victor
Victor, who immediately blames the monster. The monster absconds with her as she's dying, and they're in an ice cave. I was like, oh no, they're gonna electrocute her. Fortunately, that didn't happen, but she kind of more or less says, I have never really found satisfaction in life, and at least in death, I'm kind of here with you, and you're this new meaning to me,
And you can read that two ways.
You can read it two ways.
In the gothic sort of trope of like, I'm in love with the monster, or you can read it with the exact intent of what you've just described.
I'm maybe choosing to read it unromantically because I love a non-romantic plot for a woman.
But that's my point. I think that's why I'm saying this is designed to be read both ways.
Yeah.
And I think it's
would he have chosen her for his companion? Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's the tragedy, is that he didn't need Victor to build him a companion. He just needs to be with
one
her.
all along.
Yeah, exactly. And she would have been perfect for him. And you're also 100% correct, which is that this is more for Elizabeth than most other versions of this film, of this story has ever done for her. Because in the book, for example, she is just the betrothed wife. She's ultimately set up to be the victim at some point, and you could argue, and I think this is a fair criticism of the Branagh version, because she's played by Helena Bonham Carter, who eventually becomes the bride of Frankenstein. She is brutally victimized in that film. Like there's a brutality to it as well. But I think, so to my, reading of the film, I think it's an interesting step forward to try and do this with Elizabeth, and I think making her not Victor's actual sister partner, kind of thing, is interesting. Does it get there by the end of it? that's where it kind of lands in the same place for me for like the Christoph Waltz edition, which is like,
I think
interesting.
Christoph Waltz serves a purpose and is cut short. I just think the emotional resonance of the third act or the last fourth of this movie is so rushed that like it's not effective in that.
My point being is that like this is sort of coming to the sort of overall approach to the movie, which is like I did think it was interesting, and Guillermo has as we've stated entirely earned the right to try whatever version he wants to try. I don't know that it was entirely successful for me in terms of like telling this story in a definitive way, like it didn't seem like it, I sort of liken it to the fact that like Guillermo has sort of climbed this peak that he's always been afraid of, only to find out that the peaks that he's climbed behind it, and things like Nightmare Alley and Hellboy 2 and all these other stories that he's told over long periods of time are actually higher than this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You know what's interesting? I actually don't. Again, it's so fresh. I'm not
the movie I haven't seen is Crimson Peak, by the way. That's the one I really want to.
We haven't seen it.
We all want to see that.
But the movie night, I don't want to say whether or not I think it actually reaches those things or not. I think it might in different ways. Again, I want to speak to how moving and wonderful and amazing and epic I think this film overall is, and that is even with the addition of me not liking the ending. I think if you're weighing it in the total of its parts, that's a whole different ballgame. Anyway, my point is I totally can see why this version works for people and doesn't work for people. I just think it worked for me, and I dug the hell of it. And I wish it was coming out before. Well, this episode is going to be releasing a little bit early. We're going to release it on Halloween, but hopefully there's enough spoiler-free stuff before then. It comes out on Netflix on the 7th or the 11th?
The 7th.
7th. Yeah. So I know it'll be coming out soon, and I hope this at least gets people at least the first half.
Yeah, I actually really like Prashant's email in terms of like relating how this idea of nurturing technology requires both nurturing the relationship to technology, and ultimately in this film, the monster is technology. Yeah. And our relationship to the monster is actually what determines how we imbue it with humanity. And I think, that is the great success of this movie, despite the fact that I haven't read it out yet, but Prashant, was ultimately disappointed by the film. To me, the actual success of the film was, in a weird way, the Disney princessification of the monster himself. Like he was this sort of beautiful light. Yas queen. Like when he's walking around in the sort of Rocky Horror Picture Show kind of tidy whities the whole time, I was like, yes.
Yeah. I did love, we both called out his military coat that he pulls out of the woods for different reasons. Matt loved that the little like note that like the skeleton that had been inside it had been there for so long that it has the skull track
impression on it.
Yeah. And I love that they remembered like, oh wait, this guy is like almost freakishly tall. Yeah. So it's so short on him. The coat does not fit him at all. And I appreciated that they didn't just make a hulking coat for him.
Costumes in this are nuts.
Costumes are beautiful. Big surprise.
The realization that he is a Highlander, like his body can regenerate after being, shelled with dynamite. I was like, well, this is a choice. This is an interesting choice. I don't quite love this, but I was like, well, whatever at this point. And also the fact that he's also, a superhero, like he can, this is something that has never been done. He can lift the ship out of the flows.
Yeah. The regeneration of it is the thing that actually enables it's interesting. That's what enables the final moment of dad stuff even though I think it is rushed.
Yeah.
The reason why Oscar Isaac's Victor sort of turns around is like, well, if you can't die, you better fucking live.
Now it's time to live.
And look, it's
go
funny.
forth, Highlander.
And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon.
No, but like, I think that's really an awesome way to take this story. I think it speeds there too quick by the end. And that's sort of my last thing.
I think the pacing maybe could have been better at that last minute just because, they make up real quick is the problem. It's like a big fight movie, and then very suddenly it's like kisses on the forehead. It is a long movie. Yeah. I really like the pacing.
I think it's great.
Can I make a wacky pitch? Or maybe it's not a pitch.
Sure,
but it was my big thought when I was watching this movie. Because we're in this moment where we're getting all these gothic movies. We had this one. We just had Nosferatu, which I loved. But I
4K,
think,
baby.
I think that this is more successful than Nosferatu because I think Guillermo's lens is so romantic and so grotesque that it lends to the emotionality of this story better than the Nosferatu film, which I know Nosferatu technically isn't Gothic, but its source material is Gothic. And I think a lot of people's problems with Nosferatu is they're so used to kind of like a gritty realism in a lot of the ways that we see horror stories now. And so when everybody was speaking like this and making very big actions, it felt crazy and dramatic, but that was kind of the point of that story. Anyway, there is a lot of crisscrossing between now and then in this movie, in my opinion. And I'm going to start with Christoph Waltz's character, whose name I did forget. But he's this created character. He's the benefactor of Victor. And he's like, we'll talk about why later. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Big surprise. Turns out that as soon as he discovers that Victor is close, he's like, okay, I'm dying of syphilis and I need you to put my brain in that hot guy. And I thought immediately of Steve Carell in Mountainhead. And this story of tech bros chasing immortality and power.
There was a Ryan Reynolds film where he gets his body transferred into a young guy as well.
Really?
Yeah. It came out a few years. It was one of the direct-to-streaming Ryan Reynolds movies. I want to say Ryan Reynolds.
It sounds like a Ryan Reynolds one.
Yeah.
So we have that. And then we have, this analogy of the monster as technology and this like new gift that the monster itself did not sign on to. And I think that we're in this weird crisscrossing moment where the answer of why are we getting all these Gothic stories right now? And we're getting huge amounts of Gothic romance stories. We've got this one. We've got The Bride ! Coming out soon, which is Maggie Gyllenhaal's directed take on The Bride of Frankenstein. We have that absolutely unhinged Wuthering Heights coming up.
Yeah, with Jacob Elordi, yeah.
Yes, and I'll put Saltburn in this too. I thought Saltburn was a pretty, had some Gothic trimmings to it. And we have this story in Frankenstein about loneliness and egotism and returning to nature. And, we were just at the beginning of this, you brought up like the Blood in the Machine, which is about the Luddite rebellion against industrialization. And so
you think that's where we're going?
I think we are
we're one step
seeking
towards
humanism
Dune.
in this moment where we're facing automation and late stage capitalism. And we want a return to nature and a return to innocence. And that's what our movies are kind of dragging us towards right now. Not dragging.
That makes sense.
Not dragging. Many movies are scratching that itch for us. That's my take.
You're saying that the movie should have ended with roll credits, that Enigma song, Return to Innocence? We're really like, this is the return to innocence.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I was saying. Thank you.
Spoiler point down to that.
Shahir, hey, thanks. Thanks, Shahir.
This is why they get me in the room.
Hey,
this is why Ang Lee was
Yeah,
I was like,
I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Did you sing that song to him?
I said, you know what? You should have ended the Hulk with. It was the Return to Innocence.
He's like, yeah, I gotta go.
Yeah, please go away.
Anyway.
Something that popped out to me in this movie, especially with all the bits with the wolves.
He does like throat punch a lot of wolves.
There were a lot of violent wolf and sheep deaths. There's a level of like violence that Guillermo is perfect at. He really utilizes body horror exceptionally in this movie. They talk about it. They talk openly about violence. There's a great line from David Bradley. Shout out to David Bradley. Congrats for not playing a weird old villain in this movie. We've been doing that for a while. Where he talks about, they're talking about Paradise Lost, and he says, I think that's why God sent us his son. It wasn't the sacrificial idea. He said he must have been curious about suffering. It was like God, he planted God as this scientist that has almost a sociopathic ability to tinker with us.
It's the DeLacy family, right? Is that the name of the family?
Yeah. The Woodsman. It was a very fabled take on them in Guillermo's. Again, with fabling and Guillermo makes sense. But it just reminded me in this coming up of intense cruelty and showing the violence in nature and human nature. how many different ways you can look at Frankenstein, and how this one I think was a masterful adaptation. But I think about I always think about my mom when I think about Frankenstein. You happened to see her last week when she was visiting.
Yeah,
she is lovely. And
I didn't see her.
She and Matt actually don't speak.
No.
They hide in other rooms.
Is it like the bride meeting the groom right before the wedding? You can only see her.
It's been weird, but it's been going on for 8 years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
She always remembers the story. When I was a kid, I was like seeing a tutor because I was bad at math. And I was at this center. I'm still bad at math. And I was at this this tutoring center, and someone there was reading Frankenstein and writing a paper on it or something. And my mom said, "Oh, you're reading Frankenstein. I didn't read that. Is it about this monster in some way?" She asked some question, and that was probably a little bit basic to this person reading it. And this person said, "Well, it's really not about monsters at all. It's about people who are different." And so my mom's read, after that, she read it, and she, for me growing up, I had a lot of trouble in school, and everything was very sort of difficult. And so I think to me, it was that story growing up. That's what I took from it at my young age, was how you can learn even if you're struggling and even if things are against you. And I love that that's a read. And now I love that as I'm older, I see it in a completely different way. And I love that, Matt, you see it as dad stuff, as this story of fatherdom and playing God, and what abuse begetting abuse, and what you teach handing down. I think that's why it's such an incredible text, is because it's endlessly abundant in how you can see it.
And I love that she here sees it as a vehicle for early 90s.
Electronic music. And I'm going to die on this hill, which is that would have made it infinitely better in my eyes to end it with Enigma's Return to Innocence. And in fact, any movie ending with Return to Innocence by Enigma will be infinitely better.
Well, if you don't end your movie with Enigma's Return to Innocence,
put your money where your mouth is.
That's true.
I'll tell Mr. Lee about this.
A couple of really quick observations before we go out on it. I did like this adaptation, but looking again at all the text, I think the Kenneth Branagh film adaptation was the most interesting one to me. The details that are in the book that I had never heard before was the history of the DeLacy family. Is it DeLacy or yeah, I think it is DeLacy.
It's DeLacy or maybe Delancey, but it sounds like DeLacy.
But the history of how that family ends up there is fascinating, because it's sort of in direct opposition to Victor Frankenstein's story, which is that they are a family that has been ousted by French society, and there's actually been and it is
because they wanted to marry someone that was not.
There's
French.
A racially motivated Muslim thing in it involved that drew that ousted that family from France and ended them up there. And I was like, oh,
classic Gothic literature to be like, hang on, we've got to talk about something else for a while.
I'm just going to give you 20-page backstory onto this particular family who we're going to exit out stage left as quickly as possible. I thought that was really, really fascinating. And then the other thing is in the book, and I think this is where maybe that sort of observation is that the real monster is, Frankenstein is not the monster, it's the creator. And then in Guillermo del Toro's version, there's I was like, this is the most unsubtle moment when William basically says to Victor, You're the monster. I was like,
and then
oh boy, just for anyone in the cheap seats out there, we're just going to really spell that out. But the
third act goes fast.
The monster is the most incredibly gifted learner that anyone that I've ever.
He's inherently intelligent.
He's incredibly intelligent. Actually, is he a he? That's sort of a question mark that I raised.
Well,
thinking about the fact that he's bored up from different body parts.
Well,
he's coded as he.
But
don't. I think it would be interesting to read it.
He's got underpants on.
Yeah.
But there's a bit of a conversation about that because Victor keeps referring to the monster as it.
Yeah. And I think there's an interesting.
Elizabeth is like, that's fucked up. He completely objectifies this monster immediately.
But and I think there is a wonderful opportunity for the monster to be the philosophical engine to the film.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's the thing I think no film has quite gotten to yet, which is that the monster is incredibly smart, incredibly well read, is far more thoughtful about his creation than Victor is, and far more thoughtful about like what the responsibilities of creation are.
Well,
and is really eloquent and beautiful and well spoken. And it's like, oh wow, this
it's a big big part of it is that he's always like, I'm awful because I'm so sad, and because humanity has made me this way.
And the greatest line I think in the text from all versions is this line, and it's in this film as well, but like the one I'm remembering is Robert De Niro reading it, which is like, I have in me a love that you cannot imagine and a rage also. And if I cannot have one, I will indulge the other.
Yeah. And
I think like that is this like beautiful thing about this film, which is like on the opposite side of good here is evil. And the similarity between Del Toro and Shelley that is consistent is that Shelley loves the monster and Del Toro loves the monster. That's the one thing that I think this adaptation really gets right over every other adaptation.
Yeah.
Is
that's well put.
Yeah. Both Shelley and Del Toro love this monster. And both recognize the monster as the hero of the text.
Yeah. And wrapping up this entire episode with a little bow, I feel like Prashant's email about like the monster representing technology and what happens to technology as well if you either care for it or abuse it or ignore it. I think it all wraps up well. There's a lot of different reads you can do to this thing, and I think many of them, as you just sort of put here, are very true to the original.
Yeah.
Hey,
we're getting a Mary Shelley movie.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah, I didn't know until today. Yeah, Elle Fanning is going to play her, and it's coming out in May.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
Look at that.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, this has been the only podcast about the film Frankenstein. Jamie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. Again, I live here.
You do live here. Where can folks find you when you're not living here?
Hey, email me. How about that?
Oh, boy.
JamieLouiseWalsh@gmail.com. Yeah, I do. You know what I'll do? I'll draw something for you if you pay me. I'm freelancing again.
Oh, wow. There you go.
Hey, and it'll be worth every cent.
That's true.
It can be as smutty as you want.
I wouldn't say that on the internet.
Name withheld.
Yeah. Shahir, when you are not pumping so many volts into whatever creation you are concocting, where can folks find you?
You can find me using all of my galvanistic skills at my website, suvanova.com. That's SUVANOVA. Matt, when you are lithing around in tighty-whitey underwear, much to my chagrin on this episode, where can people find you?
You can find me just staring at my own reflection in the cleanest sewage water I've ever seen in my entire life over at my website, or both of them, Extra History and Extra Credits on YouTube. Also, please check out, what are we doing over there? Oh, by the time this comes out, it will be our Dark Souls episode, our thing on Soulsborns and the secret sauce of what actually makes them special, and the weird road to Night Rain will be out on Extra Credits. And then, of course, we'll be having our episode on Alexander the Great. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, actually, both of these are coming out later than I'm saying. Alexander the Great's Egypt, where we follow the trek into Egypt, then the Ptolemaic rule after Alexander passes. Spoiler alert for history. Next week,
well, we got a lot of options. There's a lot of stuff coming out.
I'm seeing, I forget what the actual release is, but I'm going to see Wake Up Dead Man, which will be absolutely lovely. I know I want to see that soon, but we probably want to wait until other folks can see it coming out sooner.
We've also got Running Man coming out.
Running Man.
And Predator Badlands coming out as well. And I do want to get to Begonia. I think I am actually seeing Begonia this weekend.
Nice.
If I can get along to it. So we, to Matthew, who emailed us in about what our next movie is, we have decisions to be made.
That's true.
We don't know what we're doing. Please email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com and tell us to get our act together, because we have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah. Jamie, what should we do?
I don't know. I'm always telling you, get your act together.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that's what we'll do then.
Let's do it.
Hey, no. Wait, we're doing Miscongeniality.
Oh, hey, look at that. Gotta go.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Victor.